Hi there, and welcome to Gimme 2. My name is Mark, and in this video, we're going to talk about brewing beer in just 2 minutes. So the 2 minutes in this video will talk about the process of brewing beer, and if you're interested in going straight there, it is time-stamped in the description. But if you stick around for a couple of minutes before then, I give a little bit of context and details on what beer and other alcohols are, which might be a little insightful. The concept of brewing beer, and making alcohol in general, goes back thousands of years and was used as a method of preserving beverages before pasteurization. And for a couple of other things. Let's be honest, there are plenty of other benefits to alcohol, and maybe a couple of downsides too. Let's talk a little bit about alcohol. So there are 3 main types of alcohols: isopropyl, methyl, and ethyl, all of which, by the way, are toxic. Now, we drink ethyl alcohol, or ethanol, which, while toxic, our livers can digest in small quantities. Overconsumption can be very dangerous, which is one of the reasons that there are age restrictions on drinking alcohol. So if you are below that age, please don't drink alcohol. When a yeast or another microorganism digests a carbohydrate, one of the byproducts is called ethanol, and this process is called fermentation. If we distill one of these fermented liquids or byproducts, we get highly concentrated alcohol beverages called spirits or liquors. When not distilled, we get a variety of fermented beverages depending on what was fermented. Grapes gives us wine, honey gives us mead, apple juice, cider, rice gives us sake, and grains, that gives us beer. There are 4 ingredients that are essential to every beer. There's water, self-explanatory. Then there's the malt or the grain, which both adds some flavor, also provides the carbohydrate for the fermentation. Then there's yeast, which converts the carbohydrate into alcohol. And then there are hops, which both preserves and provides flavor and aroma to each beer. Fun fact, if you make a beer but you replace hops with a different herb that accomplishes the same thing, it is called a gruit and not a beer. Finally, there are 2 main classifications of beer, each with many subclassifications, and both of which go through the same general process of brewing. There are ales, which ferment in warmer temperatures for a little bit shorter and use something called top fermenting yeast. And there are lagers, which ferment for longer in cooler temperatures and use bottom fermenting yeast. The 2 minutes, which I'm going to start shortly, goes through the general process of brewing beer. It does not talk about specific recipes or which yeast to use or how much water. These are all specific to each beer. But now that we have an understanding of what beer is, the generalities of alcohol, and what the 2 minutes are going to be about, let's get that clock started now. The first step is to take specialty grain, the grain type depending on the beer that's being made, and to steep it in water, usually in a mesh cloth, for about a half an hour at 150 to 170 Fahrenheit. Now, after steeping, which draws out color and flavor from that grain, add malt to your mixture and mix thoroughly. This gives you wort, which is essentially unfermented beer. Bring the wort up to and keep it at a boil, the length of the boil depending on the beer. During the boil, add hops or other ingredients depending on the recipe to add flavors and aromas to your beer. Boils typically take 1 to 2 hours, but that is not a hard rule. Everything that comes in contact with your beer after the boil must be sanitized. Otherwise, you risk contaminating or even killing your yeast and adding unwanted bacteria or flavors to your beer. When the boil is complete, cool the wort as quickly as possible to a temperature that can accommodate the yeast. This is roughly 70 degrees for ales and 50 for lagers. This can be done by submerging the pot in an ice bath, using a wort chiller, Google it, or adding ice to your wort, but make sure everything is sanitary and done quickly to avoid contamination. Once the amount of water and the temperature are appropriate, transfer the wort into a fermenter. These can range from plastic buckets for beginners, carboys for more experienced homebrewers, or even huge steel vats for breweries. Add yeast to your wort and store it in a dark temperature appropriate location. Cover the fermenter with an airlock that prevents unclean air from getting in, but allows fermentation byproducts to escape. After a few weeks of fermentation, transfer your beer into either kegs or bottles, depending on where you're serving it from, and add sugar solution to the beer. Let the beer sit for another week or so, allowing the sugar to develop into carbonation, and you should be ready to serve. I hope you enjoyed that video. I have brewed beer in the past, but this was still a lot of fun to research and make sure I got all of those steps. And I really hope you learned something from it. If you did, please consider liking, subscribing, commenting, hitting the bell, all those good things, and I hope to see you in another video. Thanks so much for watching.